go. All righty. Hello, everyone, and
How's it
welcome
going?
to the Drowned Kingdom Saga. P.O. Stewart on my YouTube channel. Today, I have the extreme privilege, the honor of hosting a chat about a fantastic fantasy series, a Norse-inspired series whereby the first book was a self-published fantasy blog off finalist. So if that's any indication of the popularity and how well crafted this series is, the first book did reach the finals of SPFBO. The wonderful author Tim HARDIE is someone I have immense respect for. I'm humbled to consider him a friend. His works, his books, some of them are among my favorite of any self-published fantasy books that I've ever read. And today I am joined by two amazing guests, Douglas Lumsden and Alan Behan, who are here to also, because like me, they're huge fans of Tim's work. We know Tim's got a lot of fans, but we're the really lucky ones that get to sit down with Tim and talk to him about his books. They've joined today so we can really dive deep into what makes this series so amazing. And for those of you who haven't heard of it, perhaps give you a reason to really want to get into this series. So, and of course, that series is Brotherhood of the Eagle. And it's the first book, Hall of Bones, as I said, SPFBO finalist. We're here today, folks, by the way, just to make Tim blush as much as humanly possible, because we know that, you know, the praise that's going to be coming will probably turn him beet red, but that's okay. That's all a good thing. So I'll start off by giving the awesome guest and then finally the author a chance to introduce themselves, say a little bit about what they do in the space. So in this case, we'll start with Douglas. We'll go to Alan, and then we will finish up with Tim. So welcome, Douglas, and thanks for coming. How are you doing today? Tell us a bit about you, please.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed Tim's saga. It's on my probably top 25 list of books in all genres that I've ever read. So very pleased to be here to embarrass him and tell him all these nice things. I'm a retired teacher. I have got my own series of urban fantasy, noir urban fantasy, I call it. Starts with a troll walks into a bar, and I'm hard at work on a spin-off series. That was a 7-book series with an additional novella, and I'm hard at work on a second series set in the same world, the Shade the Collector series. So that's all you need to know about me. Happy to pass this torch on.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, and I am definitely a fan of Douglas's writing as well, and we'll get into that later on. Love the Troll Walks into the Bar and planning to read more of his books very soon. And Alan, you sir, how are you today?
Hi guys, I'm Alan Behan. I write reviews for Fanboy Addicts from Dublin, Ireland. I've been writing reviews for Fanboy Addicts for about just over a year now, I think. David Walters asked me to join after seeing some of the reviews on Facebook and online, and was delighted to join the family. So I've been doing that for a long time. I love supporting all indie authors, just to get their work out there, because just find that indie authors' work is just as good as any other authors out there, like, you know, whether they're famous or not, like, you know. So, and plumber by trade, and yeah, that's me. So pass you on to Tim.
Thanks so much, Alan, for coming out. Check out Alan. He writes some wonderful reviews on Fanboy Addict, which is a fantastic blog site, well known, of course, especially for their involvement in the self-published fantasy blog off, which again Tim has been a part of and has gotten all the way to the final. So thanks again, Alan, for coming out, loving the Viking helmet as we talked about off camera, and the green that matching the Broken Brotherhood, the final book in the Brotherhood of the Eagle, kind of color coordinating there. So yeah, it's right above the head. So yeah, we love that. So Mr. HARDIE.
Yep. Hello. Yeah. Thanks for that lovely introduction, PL. I'd say, first of all, thanks guys for doing this. I think it is really touching that people take the time out of their morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is, because we're right across the world here, sort of different places all come together to talk about the series. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. So thanks, first of all. I'm not sure there's much more I can actually say that you haven't already covered, PL, in terms of who I am. So, but just for the record, I'm Tim Hardie. I'm an independent fantasy author, and I've written the Brotherhood of the Eagle series, which started with Hall of Bones. You put on the screen earlier on, and it's 4-book series. It's just been concluded about 8 weeks ago now. It would have been, feels like forever. 8 weeks ago now with Broken Brotherhood, the 4th and final installment. I've also written, I will just mention it because PL tells me off if I don't, I have written a standalone book as well, A Quiet Vengeance, which is set in the same universe, but entirely sort of different story, entirely different cast of characters. So I've basically got 5 novels out, and I suppose at the moment I'm kind of in a bit of a hiatus stage, having finished the series, thinking about the next project, but also trying to get the word out that the series is complete as well. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Tim. You're far too modest, and you know that
this will be a problem for this podcast, probably. So
don't you love that we have 4 different accents going on here?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're all from different parts of the world, different countries, and I mean, Alan is representing the Emerald Isle there, Ireland, and Douglas is from Cali, is out in Cali in the U.S., a beautiful state on the southernmost coast of the U.S. Of course, Tim is from the United Kingdom, and I am from Canada, out there north of the U.S. So, but yeah, from all over the world, but brought together by a love and appreciation of Tim's writing and his fabulous series. Just going to quickly say I was extremely honored to get a copy from Tim of Broken Brotherhood, and again, fabulous way to wrap up the series, but we will get into that shortly. So maybe perhaps we can start off by getting specifically from Douglas and Alan, and also I will add my 2 cents about general overall impressions about Brotherhood of the Eagle, why we love it, what makes it so great overall. Kind of spoiler free, because we will get into spoilers soon, but just essentially why we love it, some of the characteristics that make it so great and stand out in the indie fantasy genre. Douglas, would you like to go first?
Sure, no problem. I first of all, I'm a huge fan of fantasy novels anyway, epic fantasy, and various other kinds as well, urban fantasy. What I really liked about Tim's work is that we have a really multi-layered approach. So we have the epic high fantasy with divine powers and ambitious people competing for high positions, high political positions. We've got wars between realms and domains at a very high level, but at the same time, we have really, really gritty and gore-filled battle scenes. That are fought in the mud and in fog and rain, and where nobody really knows what's going on. They're just trying to survive. And then we have characters who are just from everyday walks of life. One of my favorite characters is a fisherman who just finds himself all involved in events that are way over his head that he has no understanding of, but he's intimately involved, and all he wants to do is put food on the table for his family. It turns out to be a rather strange family, but he's down there at the very lowest levels of society, and caught up in these big events. But through him, especially, I think we can really see the different layers that are going on in this fantasy epic, and that really appeals to me. And the other thing that I really enjoyed is we've got more than 100 characters in this book, and dozens and dozens of them are very, very deeply developed, and it's just an easy world to get lost in. You can just really feel yourself. You feel that you yourself have a place in this world, that you can fit into it. at some level or another. And the characters all develop. They're all highly interesting. I tried to sit down and decide which was my favorite character, and I came up with about 10. So it's really hard to decide which one I like the best. I guess I finally settled on Jury Turncloak, who starts out apparently as a side character and then just develops into like one of the major characters in the book, and really has a very interesting character arc. So those are some of the reasons why I really enjoyed this. And it's exciting, and it catches you up, and you've got triumph and tragedy and everything in between. And there's just a lot of meat in this saga. And I love sagas. Njaal's saga is one of the best books I've ever read. And this, I wouldn't say it really reminds me of Njaal's saga, but it certainly has a place in the list of sagas, and that saga approach. It's just something you can really sink your teeth into. And I just really couldn't wait to turn the pages and get through all 4 books just as quickly as I possibly could. So there you go. Yeah. I hope you're good and embarrassed now.
Oh yeah, this is going to be awful. I can already tell. No.
You should
you
be.
Burned through it as well, Doug. It's fair to say. I think you're probably one of the people that's read the series the fastest I've ever seen. So I was quite impressed with that. Actually,
I couldn't stop, and I'm retired. I don't have a whole lot of other things to do. And you got lucky in the fact that I was between books, so I wasn't writing my own books while I was reading yours. So I was able to just sit down from morning to night and just bury myself in it, and it was a great experience.
That's amazing, unputdownable. Yeah, I wish I could have binge read Brother of the Eagle. I think I will on reread, because this is definitely a series that has a ton of reread value. So, but yeah, it was so well said, Doug. Amazing insights. Alan, what about you?
Yeah, what I loved about Brotherhood of the Eagle is the really, really dark setting. The amount of characters that you could love and hate throughout the series. Now, there was a lot of characters that you could hate, and you were always looking forward to seeing their comeuppance and all that stuff. But there's a lot of characters that had to grow very quickly in it that I loved as well, because the tragedies that had happened to them and all that stuff, like, But yeah, it's one of those series that just hits you right in the spot when some of your favorite characters, like, it's just I don't know, it's just but it's just one of those what you call it, just dark, bloody, fast paced, just couldn't get enough of it, like, and when looking forward to the 4th book when it came out, just to finally see what happens and all that. But no, I'm looking forward to now to see what happens now with the audiobook from RJ Bailey. To just because the way a narrator can really hit home some of the scenes, and you can go deep into it. That's what I'm looking forward to now from hearing RJ Bailey, because I've listened to RJ Bailey before on some other series by what's his name, Lee Connolly. Yeah, his series, and the accent is throughout it, like, it's absolutely brilliant. So that's your series now is something I can't wait to hear from RJ Bailey, because I know he'll do a great job. Or so that's what I'm looking forward to now to seeing. But Tim, you had me heart broken so many times throughout that series, like, Sometimes I even have to put down for a couple of days after reading some of the
story. I think it does worry me sometimes, actually, because I think the characters do go through some pretty awful things. In some ways, you're better off when you die. Sometimes that's actually preferable to surviving. But I think, I think it's nice for me to hear, actually, people going through the mill, and the characters going through the mill is something you enjoy reading about. Even if you might need to take a break, basically, to recover.
I did call you the Grim Reaper in one of my reviews of the characters, like, slicing and dicing through all of them. But I have to say that series now is in my top 20 big time.
Oh,
You know,
cheers, mate. That's so kind of you.
and, I look forward to getting me signed copies from you.
It will happen. We will find a way to make this happen. I really started to think now I do need to look at the logistics of selling direct and stuff, but it's just timing wise, it's been all about the writing so far. But I think people are asking that question more often, which is really nice because it's never happened before.
Well, as you can see behind me, I have a lot of books. This series has to grace my shelves. You know.
Right. Okay. There's a challenge straight off. We'll sort that out.
Up beside Holly Tinsley, up beside Lee Connolly, and all. Yeah, definitely. You know, all my favorite indie authors. You know.
There you go, Tim. High praise from a very esteemed blogger, and well deserved. I quickly want to put up before I get to my overall comments. We have the wonderful John A. Douglas here, brilliant author and book tour himself. Hey, John A. And he says especially to Douglas Lumsden, a fellow Douglas on the panel. Can't have enough Douglases.
No.
For sure in one place. The awesome Zero Zaku one. Hey, thanks for coming by. He comments about Brotherhood of the Eagle, Tim's series. This series was a wonderful ride. The last book broke my heart. I totally concur. Zero Zaku one. It is just the poignancy in Tim's series it's just phenomenal. As Alan hinted to, you have these characters that you just care about all of them, as many as they are, and there's a lot. And Tim has that skill of making you care about this huge sprawling cast of characters.
But there's a lot of uplifting events in that last book too, and the ending has it's both high and low. It breaks your heart, but it also it inspires you too. So.
No, I totally agree. And then Zero Zaku one says, "Poop, Rothgar."
I think he means
poor Rothgar. What is the next comment? And he also says, "And leave too." Zero Zaku one just knocking off some of his favorite Brotherhood of the Eagle characters. Quickly, what I will say is, and I've said this before to Tim, I'll say it again. It's not about comparators. There's so many great authors out there. There's so many authors that write fantastic fantasy. You see similarities in certain authors, and it's not about comparisons. Tim's series is unique and special in its own right, and but I will say this: one of my absolute favorite authors, whether published traditionally through indie, is John Gwynne. His books are just behind me on that shelf, and Tim's are just right nearby. You can't see them, but and I have some of the rest of them here. But in terms of a comparator, Tim is the closest to John Gwynne, and anywhere John Gwynne is the closest to Tim, whichever way you'd like to look at it. Tim's ability, as Alan highlighted, to make you care about these characters, to fret over every little thing that happens to them, and Tim puts them through some real tough moments, as he indicated. He's sparing them. He doesn't spare them. No pain, no gain here. And he just makes you just devastated if they don't survive. You're cheering for their every little triumph. He has that skill and ability to really engross you and make you invested in the characters at a level that very few authors are able to do. And that is a rare skill, and one that Tim definitely possesses. And I will say this again, and this is a compliment I'm going to turn back on him that he gave to me. You write a pretty good battle scene there, eh, mate? Yeah. Tim, like John Gwynne, and John Gwynne like Tim, they are some of the best epic, heroic fantasy battle scenes. Look no further than Tim HARDIE. They are epic. The last battle shall I say both last battles? Yeah. The actual last battle and the one previous to that were just astounding. And if we talk about the I guess you could say the penultimate battle leading up to the ultimate battle at the end. Wow. I probably reread that battle already. Even though I haven't read the complete series, I probably reread it about 3 or 4 times. And one of the reasons I read it, obviously, was so compelling, but also because it's just a great example for someone like me who aspires to write good battle scenes. Yeah. Tim is someone I look up to as that example, that level. Yeah. So, I learn a lot from him in how he constructs and choreographs a battle scene. They're also exceptional. So he's someone I admire, along with the John Wynns and the Miles / Christian Camerons and the Evan Winters, of writing those phenomenal battle scenes. So I think those are the things that stand out about.
I have team up there with Stephen Erickson for writing battles. It was absolutely epic. The adrenaline I got when reading some of them battles just had me heart palpitating all the time, like, you know. Or and then I'd have the wife beside me looking at me going, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay."
Well, one of the keys for writing these great epic battles, of course, is that Tim does a great job. John Gwynn, BL, you do a good job with this too. You got to give yourself some credit there. But that is the main characters in the battles. You know, they can only see so much of what's going on around them, and they're unaware of all the things that are going on, you know, just hundreds of yards away. There's the old phrase, the fog of war, and Tim does a great job of capturing this fog, where you got a character and he's something is happening, noises are occurring, people, blood is spilling, people are gasping and yelling. You don't really know the specifics. You don't even know who you're facing often. You know, sometimes in the middle of a battle, you suddenly realize this might be a person I know, you know, or somebody you know has come to your aid. And where did they come from? We don't know. All we see is the immediate peril. And Tim, you do such a great job of capturing that fog that occurs in the midst of those epic battles. And I must also add, your individual duels come across very well. So you got the big epic battles; those are exciting, and then you have the individually fought duels; those are equally exciting. I really enjoyed those as well.
Crikey, it's hard to know what to say when people keep saying these things. I think it's interesting because I think with the individual duels and things like that, you know, I do like action. I think, you know, I like the character work and I like the politics, which kind of builds.
Right,
the matters around all of that. But I always think with an individual duel and stuff, I always make them as short as possible, because in reality, they would be over really quickly, because sooner or later someone's going to end up on the end of something spiky or very heavy and blunt. So trying to sort of like get through those as quick as I can is actually the objective. And with the epic battles, they're a totally different approach, because I mean you wouldn't believe the tables and the charts and the notes that have to go into trying to work out who is where, and then also if the tide of war is going against you. So basically, at the end of every chapter, I have to sort of write a tactical position, because obviously I have like a day job and I have to go and do other things that aren't writing. If I didn't do that and came back, I wouldn't know where I got to, what was happening. So I think if you want to write good battle scenes on the individual dueling side for all, you know, prospective authors and things, my advice would be keep it short. But if you want to try and scale up, you need to take, in my experience, copious notes to make it so that there isn't a continuity error, basically, and someone already died or something like that.
That's an excellent point. Sorry, go ahead.
It's amazing with the number of characters you have involved in these epic battles. It would be totally forgivable if all of a sudden somebody who died in the last battle popped up in the next one. I
really hope that hasn't happened. Now I've said that, I'm thinking that hasn't happened, has it? I'm sure it hasn't.
But Tim, in your books, that wouldn't be necessarily out of the realm of possibility.
But it literally does happen. But we need to put the spoiler warning up before we start to get into that sort of stuff, I guess.
Exactly. But I quickly, before we go there, I just want to raise that excellent point in that there are two different skills, right? And Douglas, you know this from writing fight scenes in general, and Ali, you know this from reading them, and Tim and I know this from writing more of this, specifically both the 1v1s versus the big sprawling battles, is that there are two different skills. And as Tim said, you know, those duels typically, and I'm not one to give advice per se, but my experience in terms of what I like to read and in terms of what I like to write, like Tim, those 1v1s, they're brutal, they're over quickly, because that's how it would be had they been real. But those big, sprawling, epic battles, to choreograph them, you have to keep an eye on what this individual person is doing, where they are, after they wound up being thrown from their horse? Where would they be? Facing north, south, east, west? What would happen to the horse? What happened to the people when the horse fell? And, so there's just so much to essentially choreograph, and it's not easy, Tim. And that's why hats tip to you, because you do such a fantastic job and it looks seamless when you read it as a reader. So you really have to pat yourself on the back, my friend, for that.
Thank you.
In those one-on-ones, it's amazing how quickly a combatant gets exhausted.
Yeah.
It only takes a minute or two.
Yeah. I could imagine.
Yeah, and if you've ever been in a real fight, or you train with martial arts, or if you're someone such as a John Gwynn or a Christian Cameron who does these actual reenactments that wears the armor, carries the weapons, weighed down by all of that, fighting in mud, fighting in sand, these are all considerations. Temperature, whether you've already been wounded, those are all factors that have to be considered when we write these battle scenes. And for those of us, like none of the four of us, I believe, have ever fought in an ancient type battle, as far as we know. But to do it so authentically, Tim, again, hats off to you. So
ex-wrestler.
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't know.
I didn't know either, but you look like you're pretty jacked, so I can see that. And I know you're a runner too as well, so I know you're pretty fit. So for me, obviously, it's my line of work. That's where most of my combat experiences come into play. And the fights, regardless, irrespective of whether they're with weapons or not, one-on-ones, they tend to be over quickly because, again, combatants do tire, as we mentioned, and somebody gets that one punch in, and that is it, or kick. So we're gonna quickly, just so that we make it clear that at 26:40ish or so of this video, this discussion is about Tim's amazing Norse-inspired Brotherhood of the Eagle. Up until this point, we've kept it spoiler-free. So we are not spoiling you. For those of you who have read the series, or if you've read book 1 or 2 or 3 and you haven't finished, this is the point where you jump off, because we're going to provide spoilers potentially for all the books in the series. So especially for those who haven't read it and you're definitely thinking about reading it, and you should, now's the time to bail. Stop watching. Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. But come back after you've read all the books in the series in Brotherhood of the Eagle. Watch us on the replay. And I think especially with the benefit of having the author here to provide these additional insights, you're really going to get something out of it. But right now, please leave, come back, and watch this after you've read the series. So now we're going into full spoiler territory. All right. So I think as we do this, we will start off with questions from each of us for Tim. Things that have been burning you about the series. Perhaps it's something that Tim can give you that extra little bit of information on, potentially, as a writer from his perspective, what his intent was when he wrote it. Questions about perhaps the fate of one of your favorites, perhaps going forward, if Tim's going to write more with that. Whatever questions you have, we'll start with Alan, and any questions you have about Tim's series 4, Tim's stuff. But I'm just going to quickly flash this on screen before we get started. The wonderful Tori Talks is here, an amazing author. The Bloodstones. Now there is another amazing book that one of my faves. Her book Phased was also great. Bloodstones was one of my top indie books of the year, along with one of Tim's, actually, because it made that list. So Tori's amazing, a fabulous booktuber. Check out her channel. She has exceptional content. Tori, thanks so much for stopping by. It's always a pleasure to see you. She just says, just say, I can't wait to read my first HARDIE book this year. There you go.
That is what we want. So that's great. Thank you.
Another fan, and an amazing. Tori's just a wonderful human being, an amazing author, and fabulous book tour. So thanks so much, Tori. And I think you're gonna love Tim's books.
Definitely.
All right, so we'll start with Alan, if that's okay. Alan, do you have any particular question that you would like to ask?
I've written down a couple of questions anyway, but I just wanted to, Tim, you've so many characters in this series. Who was your absolute favorite to write?
Oh gosh, that's a really difficult one straight off the bat. I mean, I did like writing them all. I do like creating characters. You probably noticed from the list. You know, I think that was almost like, I'll be perfectly honest, it was a little bit of writer inexperience that every time I got stuck for what to do, I just chucked another character into the pot, and eventually it was overflowing with characters. So I do love them all. And, you know, both the villains, you know, the good guys and the people in between. I enjoy writing all of them. I think probably the ultimate favorite is it's probably a toss-up between Hrothgar as that viewpoint, because he was the viewpoint character I always set out to create and to deliberately try and subvert some of the classic fantasy tropes to tell the type of story I wanted. So I think from a craft point of view, I'm really pleased with the way Hrothgar's character developed. You know, he was quite annoying in some respects. And I didn't always, you know, sometimes I cut him some slack, sometimes I didn't. But I think he kind of matured throughout the series, and I was really pleased with how that came together. It felt he went the way I wanted, but he also, I think, developed in a way that I thought was realistic for somebody that was, you know, goes from 16 to 19 and is still quite young. Yeah. I think the other character I really like writing, which probably might be a bit of a surprise, I really like writing Gortar Falrufsen, because it's just, again, probably one of the, in theory, the baddies of the story in many respects, and he causes a lot of he causes an insane number of problems, actually. But I like the fact that he is absolutely convinced he's right, and he's absolutely convinced that if he doesn't get into a position of power, the clan will fall. And ultimately, of course, he pretty much goes, you know what, sod you lot. I'm done. I'm done with trying to sort of maintain my position with you guys. He goes a completely different way. But I just felt he was a character which I could understand, even if he caused insane number of problems for some of the more central characters. So for me, again, one of my favourites, and that's one of the reasons why he's kind of, I needed to give him a send-off in that final book in just the same way as I did the others. He was a very important character for me to write.
Brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. Gotar is one of my favorites. One of my absolute top 3 favorites. I love the way, like you say, he thinks he's the good guy, and in many ways he is. I mean, you know, you look in a certain way, not necessarily from Hrothgar's point of view, but look in a certain way, he's really doing what's best for his people. So, he's a little arrogant about it, maybe, but I appreciate a little arrogance. So, he was absolutely one of my favorites.
That's a great question, Al. I love that question, Al. That's amazing.
It was great that he got his ass kicked in it once.
Okay, so Douglas, any burning question you have for Tim?
I have kind of a general question, and that's regarding your use of divine powers and magic. Kind of fascinating by this point of view that magic is by the main characters in this book, so shunned and so feared, and you have a bunch of characters who have turned their backs on the whole idea of magic. And so the fact that anyone who's touched with a magical skill or practices magic in any way is automatically kind of ostracized. And so I was just wondering why you took that point of view. It's it's not an uncommon one, but and I thought you did it extremely well. Is kind of wondering if you went in with that idea as one of your the basic fundamental parts of your world building, or if that's something that kind of grew and developed as you went along here.
Good question. I think it was fundamental to the world building, but only for this particular plot in this particular region. So this is part of a wider universe. So, for example, if you read A Quiet Vengeance, magic is accepted there. It's part and parcel of daily life and people. So it was very much meant to be a sort of a factor for the Alaskan clans, because they were effectively reacting to the gods' failure, and that was kind of part of one of the themes that kind of runs through the series is, the gods failed, and the war brought the world to the brink of destruction, and so ultimately people reacted to that in a number of different ways. So certain countries still banded around their old religions and still went that way. So like Matan, the sort of neighbouring kingdom where the character of Nerith comes from, they're effectively a religious theocracy, so that their magic comes from holding to those tenets still. But the people that migrated north were basically more in the camp of they wanted nothing to do with the gods, nothing to do with magic, because they'd seen the horrors that led to it being completely uncontrolled. So it was when we talk about the laws of Reeve is one of the founders of the seven clans, and he was, a bit of a dick, if we're being perfectly honest, in lots of ways. But that was one of his tenets, that he effectively tried to, I suppose, to go back to a simpler time. And by doing that, actually introduce some pretty restrictive practices, understandable in some respects, but in other ways it wasn't. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a platform to work with, so that those were deliberate choices, because they gave Hrothgar problems right from the off, because he wants to be the warrior, because that's what the society lionizes the male heir, the male line. The society lionizes combat and war and the clan wars, and it distrusts magic. So of course I basically put him in a situation where he's none of those things, and he has to lean into the magic if he's going to prosper. So it was partly a sort of a stylistic choice and decision around driving those points, really. But yeah, it's more a local point, I guess, than a worldwide view.
Right, local point, but the main focus of where you at least opened the book.
Yes, absolutely. From their viewpoint, I think that was the whole point, was to make it a very insular society, very inward looking. They'd retreated, they'd hunkered down, and they were almost trying to ignore the wider world around them. And of course, that's the other big theme that comes in, is the wider world is very much of massive relevance to them, but they don't see it. In fact, many of them don't really see it until book 4, of course, when the penny finally drops what's actually going on.
Yeah, they're turning their backs on magic and the divine powers, but those magic and divine powers haven't turned their backs on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Excellent point, and a great question, Doug. And I want to slip in there my question before, just to preface for the audience. Around 45 minutes in, we're going to take a quick break for about 10 minutes. Tim's going to stretch his back, our main guest here. And then Douglas and Alan and I, we're going to talk a bit about what they do in the space, find out a little bit more about them while Tim takes a little break, and then Tim will come back and we'll continue on. But Tim, my question is, and it's a perfect lead-in when everything, Douglas's question was ideal, and what you mentioned, because we know how much I love Brotherhood of the Eagle. It is currently one of my top indie science fiction fantasy series of all time. Watch that video that it's posted on my channel about my top science fiction fantasies, indie specifically, of all time. And we know Brotherhood of the Eagle ranked very highly on that list. We also know that on top of that, I am absolutely in love and enamored with A Quiet Vengeance. I cannot stop anybody I see. Have you read A Quiet Vengeance yet? Have you read A Quiet Vengeance yet? I love that book. That would be very, certainly, I won't spoil it, because one day I will put out a list. It will definitely be top 5 in all of the indie science fiction fantasy books I've ever read. It's definitely top 5. I'm not going to give it where it is, but when I get the list out, look for that up there in the top rankings. So my question is, because I love Brotherhood of the Eagle, I love A Quiet Vengeance. They are still normally in the same universe, as you've alluded to in your answers. How, and if you do, when you connect the world in Samarak to Brotherhood of the Eagle in a really definitive way, for example, could there, and I know you might not be able to go away too much, could there be we're getting to the NCIS territory where there's crossovers, but without spoilers, can we anticipate that potentially happening?
You should really give your audience what they want, but I'm not sure I'm going to on that one, because they're written for very different reasons. So I deliberately wrote Quiet Vengeance so it didn't have any crossover characters in it whatsoever. It's because it was a standalone, and I also didn't want people to feel they had to read all my other works to get into that book. So it is deliberately written as, in fact, it did originally have a character, Telion, who is in a side, one of the 150 side characters. Telion was a character in A Quiet Vengeance in the very first draft, that I had him actually returning to his home country to deal with the political crisis going on in there, to protect his business interests. Maybe I haven't fully fleshed it out. And I realized he's going in with the entire backstory of the Brotherhood of the Eagle, 4 books in the Norse universe that has nothing to do with this story. So actually, Telian got axed from that version of the book, and that character became Fazil, who leads the Abatet tribe in that area and represents their interests. So I basically substituted him for a different character, but didn't have the enormous backstory on it. So there is crossover in the sense that I've got a world which has a unified world religion, which I think again was a deliberate choice. So the avatars kind of like are recognized universally. They have different emphasis and different strengths of following in different parts of the world that's created. But A Quiet Vengeance was always meant to be a complete self-contained standalone tale. Now, we've talked before, haven't we, about the fact that I do want to write more sort of standalone. I call them they're basically linked standalone, so you can read them in theory in any order because they take place at different times, so that they're not sequential like Brotherhood is very much linear. You've got to go through from one to the other. I haven't written the 2 that follow, but at the moment I don't really see a crossover beyond it being a wider world. Now, whether that's what my audience wants is one thing, but I think to be true to the vision I've got of those stories and what I want to do with them, for me, it's more actually about expanding the Samarkand universe, that part, and actually, because again, if you've looked at the map on A Quiet Vengeance, it's a continent, it's got multiple realms, it's got multiple kingdoms and emirates and all the rest of it. There's a lot there, and I think if you tried to do a bridge to that other series, they're very different worlds, very different cultures, very different people, and I'm not sure the story actually needs it, if I'm perfectly honest. So at the moment, for me, I'm very much got them compartmentalized in different places. I will say, obviously, if you read both, you'll get a much wider perspective of the world, and I think where possibly some of the linkages come is actually there's a lot to uncover in terms of what drove the war, and that led to the fall of Amaran and led to it being a backward technological world, effectively. So I think if you want to understand more about that side of things and about how those things came to be, that is going to start to get explored in the sort of A Quiet Vengeance, Quiet Betrayal, and A Quiet Conquest, which is the name of the forthcoming books. But yeah, they're very different projects. They probably won't sell, I have to say, but I kind of feel compelled to write them. So I think that's where that's going. So yeah, probably not what you were hoping me to say, perhaps PL, but that's the vision for those.
No, and you know what? You made an excellent point about giving the readers perhaps not what they want, but what the author feels that they need. And I am totally satisfied with that answer because, first of all, I'm going to get to be immersed more in the world of A Quiet Vengeance, knowing, I guess, there's that part of me that will know that those two worlds are linked, and that's amazing. And of course, as you so aptly point out, there is more than enough in the world of AQV to really expand and explore as an author. You could write another 60 books in that universe. I'm sure it wouldn't be enough. I would say the same with Brotherhood of the Eagle. There's still so much, with all the clans and with all of the competing and feuding interests, with all of the kind of the cosmic stuff, gods stuff. There's so much you could write there. So I'm just happy to get anything from you, Tim. And I'm really into books.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I plan to have 2 shelves filled in my lifetime, God willing, with just Tim HARDIE books. So yeah, I am excited personally about that answer because
I haven't read A Quiet Vengeance yet.
Oh,
but, I'm totally convinced that I'm going to.
I have it in my Kindle ready to go.
Don't wait, guys. Just
haven't gotten around to it yet.
Just do it. Just do it. It is.
Definitely on the list this year.
When I'm done with my WIP, I'll jump right into it.
Yeah.
And of course, it's subjective. I think that Brotherhood of the Eagle, again, it's one of my top indie fantasy series of all time. It is incredible. It is amazing. And all the books in that series would make like a top 25 to 100 list for me as individual fantasy books. But A Quiet Vengeance for me is just on another level. Tim knows I cannot stop thinking about that book. It's just amazing, the craft there. So quickly, folks, as promised, what I'm going to do is Tim is going to take a short break so he can stretch his back out and kind of, step away for a while. And I'm going to have, they're in trouble now, Alan Douglas. I'm going to have them all all to myself to get into a little bit about what they do in this space, what they're up to. In Alan's case, all the stuff he does in Fanfi Addict and beyond, and Douglas' case is his writing as well. So yeah, we'll let Tim step out for a bit. And
Appreciate
then,
that. Yeah, just to explain to people, I've injured my back, although it is getting better. But yeah, PL's given me a little comfort break in the middle of this. So I'll leave you to it. I'll be back in about 10 minutes if that's okay, guys.
That sounds great. That sounds great, Tim. We'll see you shortly. So now we're going to get into, in the middle of this broadcast, a bit about my two esteemed guests, Alan and Douglas. So Alan, over to you first. I'd like to know, if possible, how did you get into Fanfi Addict? How did you become a blogger? What was your background kind of thing to get you involved in the whole blogging sphere?
Yeah, well, I started. I only started reading in my 30s, and I'm reading about 12 years. And I just started when I joined all the groups on Facebook and all that stuff. There was a reading competition, but you had to do reviews to be part of the competition. So I started doing reviews, and a few people were saying, like, "Oh, your reviews aren't bad," like, you know. So I kept writing them, and then David Walters, who's in charge or who's head of Fanfi Addicts, contacted me on Messenger one day and asked me would I like to become part of the family, because he liked my reviews, and he said, "Look, get your reviews out there to a wider world. Come and join us." So yeah, I've been with Fanfi Addicts there now for just over a year, and no, I haven't. This is my first time doing a face live. Yeah, so I was a little bit nervous that I was fretting all day, but it's not too bad, like, you know. But yeah, no, just been doing reviews now for about 2 years now, and I hope I'm getting better at them, you know. But David Walters wouldn't have asked me otherwise to join his family. Well, so here I am, and I'm here to stay, and I'm going to keep writing reviews for indie authors and all that stuff, like, you know. So their work deserves to be put out to a wider audience, like, you know, especially Brotherhood of the Eagle, big time, you know.
Well, thank you so much for all you do for indie authors. Thank you for everything you do with Fanfi Addict and shining a spotlight on all authors. I wouldn't know, Alan, that this is your first time on anything like this. So
I contacted Tim there during the week. I said, "Oh, Tim, I'm absolutely fretting, like, you know, it's my first time." And he says, "Look, PL's a lovely guy, and I have to say, you have me nice and calm. Lovely setting."
Oh, well, I'm honored. Like I said, I wouldn't know. Yeah. And I am very privileged to be the host of your first live. So thank you for that honor. I really appreciate it.
Hopefully I get to do another few in somewhere in the near future. So hopefully.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe you'll do me the honor of coming back onto my 6 Elementals one-on-one and we can chat.
Yeah, you know? No worries. Thanks very much. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And saying to Douglas, of course, thanks for coming so much. I do hope to also have Douglas on 6 Elemental interviews at some point because, of course, I love his books. And I've only read one so far, and Demon's Dagger. The second one is definitely, as I said, on my TBR for this year. I put it out in my TBR video for winter and spring, that this was going to be one of the books I was going to be reading, so can't wait to get to that. So, Douglas, tell us a bit about yourself. How'd you get into this writing game, my friend?
Well, okay. I was a teacher. I taught college, taught at a private high school, taught history, taught world history. And then I retired. I'd always thought maybe someday I would write a book, and just never really had the time, I felt. I have tremendous admiration for anyone who writes a book while they are working a full-time job. I just don't know how you do it. I always thought someday I would, but I had to retire in order to really get myself to sit down and do it. So once I've always been a big reader. I've read, I love fantasy. I love crime novels. I love classic literature. You know, I've always been a big reader. And I always thought I could write. And then, so I retired, and for about 2 years after I retired, maybe about 1 year, I guess, for about a year after I retired, I thought, I'll just catch up on my reading, because as a teacher, I never really had much time to read other than for my job.
Yeah.
So I'll catch up on all my fantasy reading, discovered the world of indie and self-published authors, and dove right into that. I have tremendous admiration for people like Alan who review books, review indie books. You're bless you. So one day I said, you know what? I was reading a book. I don't even remember what it was. I was actually enjoying it. And I said, yeah, I think I could do this. And I told my wife, I think I'm going to write a book. And she was very encouraging. So I sat down. So nobody's ever going to read it except for, people in my immediate family, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So I sat down and I whipped out A Troll Walks into a Bar in a little less than 3 months, and went to direct publishing, Kindle Direct Publishing, hit the publish button, said, "Oh, okay, I got a published book now," and told my family members, and they picked up a copy. So I immediately sold like 6 or 7 copies. I said, "Okay, I'm a successful author now," and what am I going to do next? And so Rita, my wife, said, "Look, why don't you get on Instagram and tell people that you've written a book?" I don't have any use for social media. And she said, "Oh, go do it." She was on it. She loved it. Okay. So I'll set up an account. I mentioned that I wrote a book. And then a prince of a fellow in Australia by the name of Asaf Mayer, who's written a tremendous series, the Toga's Daggers and Magic series.
Yeah.
Urban fantasy set in ancient Rome. Well, that's right up my alley. I think he was on Instagram and he advertised his book. So I read it. I loved it. And Rita says, "Why don't you get on Instagram and tell him that you loved your book?" "Oh, he doesn't want to hear from me." No, do it. So I sent a message to Asaf and I said, "Hey, really loved your book. I write books too. I've written a book too." And told him about it. And he read it. And in just days, he came back and said, "Loved your book. I'm going to tell everybody about it. I'm going to get on Facebook and tell everybody about it." Next thing I knew, other people were reading my book. I thought, I better go in there and take out the typos. So I went in and took out many of the typos, not all of them. And Asaf said, "Why don't you write a follow-up?" And I said, "Really?" He said, "Sure. There's things in here that I'd like to hear more about." I thought, okay, I'll write a second book. So I wrote the second book, intending that would be my last. And then I decided, well, fantasy books come in trilogies, don't they? So I'll write a third. I'll write a third urban fantasy. So I wrote the third urban fantasy, intending for that to be my last. And I ended up writing 7 books in the series, intending for each one to be the last. And then I wrote that somewhere after the fourth book. After the fourth book, I wrote that novella, The Demon's Dagger, set in the same world, where I took one of the side characters and made him the main character in a much shorter book. Made it much nastier and darker. I got to warn you, PL, it's tone's a little different in that one.
It's really interesting. Can't wait.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
It's the only book I actually put spoiler or put content warning in the front. Yeah, trigger warnings. And so I ended up writing that 7-book series plus the novella. And then I thought, I'm not a big fan of really long series. I tend to bog down. The author tends to jump the shark, or they get repetitious. I thought, I don't want to fall into that trap. So I'm going to write another series, a new series. But I loved the world that I had set up with my Alexander Sutherland series. So I kept the same world, kind of like what Tim's doing, kept the same world, but had an entirely different lead character and put him in a different location. Although the first book is kind of a crossover, it's a passing the torch. So we got one main character as a featured character in the second main character's book. And then there's a little torch passing sort of thing that goes on. And then from now on, the series will feature this new main character, and we'll go from there. Same world, but different situation, a little different tone, different kind of series. So there you go. That's what I've been doing. And I'm hard at work on the second book of that new series, my Shade the Collector series, and hope to have it out sometime during this summer. hope to have that coming up. So,
Wow,
and then I'll
that's
do a
amazing.
third one, I guess. This will be the first time, the last book was the first time I wrote one where I knew I was going to be writing a follow-up. And this one that I'm writing now, I know there's going to be a follow-up to that one as well. After that, I don't know.
Well, that's amazing. Alan, I guess you got some stuff to put on your TBR, eh?
Oh, my TBRs just after getting so huge now. I look forward to that. The troll walks into a bar. It just sounds like.
Oh,
my
it's, you got it. It is just, it's snarky, it's stabby, it's fun as hell. It is just a like, it's a perfect like palate cleanser. Like if you're between, like I read mostly big, epic, long fantasy series. But if you want that perfect book that's going to kind of reset you and just, you can just enjoy it. It's really well written. Don't get me wrong. It's prose written. But just like just to just kind of wash out the, oh my gosh, I can't keep track of these many, like, you know, it's just a perfect book. It's great. It's a great book.
Look, I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Thank you.
The other book, the demon, what was the demon one called there?
Demon's Dagger.
Demon's Dagger. Demon's Dagger.
Nice and dark as well. So I look forward to reading that as well.
Yeah.
You know,
I like to think, and I hope it's true. I like to think that the troll walks into a bar is actually my least well-written book, and that each one got better as I went. That's what I like to think. So,
well, it makes me excited. I can't wait to read it, Douglas. I'm also going to quickly cover this question. Hopefully, Tim's back. However, I will. Hey, welcome back, Tim. I'll quickly put up this question and have perhaps Alan answer Douglas answer before we get back to Tim. He asked both Alan and Douglas, what are some of your most underrated reads? So maybe Alan, if you can just recommend, just for time's sake, if you recommend one, and then Douglas recommend one of your most underrated reads, whether that's a single book or a series.
A series, well, there's a series that I've, as I mentioned probably earlier, Lee Connolly's. Hardly ever gets a mention. What's it? The Dead Sagas, Norse mythology as well, and so Vikings versus the Zombies. Absolutely amazing series. Third book coming out hopefully this year or maybe next year, but that's one of my most underrated series that I've read. You know,
that's a great rec. I have to get to it too. Lee Conley, fabulous person. I've read,
absolutely amazing.
Amazing guy. Read one of his short books, was wonderful. So yeah, that's a great rec. Alan?
I'll second that actually, Alan, because I read Lee's first last year as well. Yeah, great, really good voice. Just again, really grips you right from the get-go. That doesn't it? Brilliant book.
Yeah,
absolutely. You know, really dark setting, beautiful. You know.
Yeah, gotta check it out. Douglas.
Well, it's really hard to limit myself to one, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best to do just a couple. Peter Hartog's series is 2 books in the series at this point, is really, really good. All I can say is if you like my books, you will love his books. And Tom Mock has written a book, which I believe is called The Long Night.
Yes.
If I remember right. Enormously underrated series. Really, really needs more readers. It was a finalist in the Spitball, I believe.
Semi-finalist. Yep. Actually, I was the judge.
Yeah,
I was the judge
right?
that put that book forward. Myself and John Morrow, I believe, put that book forward
has one of the most unique approaches to a vampire story that I've ever read. Where, well, I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, I think that's one I would definitely recommend as being enormously underrated.
That's a great, right? I loved The Long Nights, as you can tell from.
Peter Hartog's books are Pieces of Eight and other title slips my mind. Sorry about that. But yeah, Peter Hartog.
Peter Hartog. Okay, fantastic. Those are great.
Bloodlines, and Pieces of Eight. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for those recs, Alan and Douglas. We really appreciate that. Hopefully, Zerazaku1, you got some great stuff to put on your TBR. All right. So Tim is back, our guest of honor. And the second half of the broadcast, perhaps what we'll do is now we're going to turn the tables and we're going to have Tim ask us some questions about his series, things that perhaps he wants to know of us in terms of what we think of as a series, impressions or specific items. So I will turn this over to Tim, and I think Tim has some questions for us. We're not sure what they are, but we'll see. So
Right. Yes, I'm slightly prepped for this. Don't worry. So I've got 3 questions. There's 3 of you, so this should be fine. This is great, by the way, because I've never been on a podcast about my stuff where I've had to talk so little. So we need more of this format, definitely. I'll go with you, I think, Alan, first, if that's all right. Because I think your previous question, I think this one works quite well, sort of turning it around. Do you think the fate, or do you wish that the fate of a particular character in the story had been different? Was there anyone that kind of had a story arc where you think, oh, I just wish that hadn't happened, or
Yeah, there's,
particularly got to you?
yeah, one of the characters, Yorick.
Yeah,
I could have happened differently. I wish it could have happened differently, but I think it was essential to the story the way it happened. It was a vicious scene. It's just just Yorick. Yeah, one of those characters that just was my favorite all the way through to, and just the way his thing came to an end. Could have been.
Yeah, it was quite a hard stop as well.
It was one of those. It was when you read the story and after the scenes and all, it was one of those you just had to walk away for a little while, But Yorick hit me hard, big time.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I have had a few readers sort of say, because obviously the first half of Hall of Bones is about building up what you think is going to be the rest of the story before it completely pivots.
Especially it was only after his father and all that stuff. He was had to becoming the head of the clan and all that stuff. And the way the carpet was just swiped out from underneath him, it's just absolutely.
Yeah.
Had to happen.
And it had to happen, but it's essential to the story, but Tim is the Grim Reaper.
I think I kind of, I suppose, I think it's killing characters. You got to be careful how you do it as well, because the shock value quickly, disappear. I'll say that loads of people die, so it doesn't disappear too much. But you got to be. I think you got to use it at the right time. I do stand by that decision to kill him, because it had to happen.
Yeah.
Otherwise there is no story, because everyone just lives happily ever after. It's a standalone. I've had a few people sort of say, I think that there's obviously quite a high body count, because it's not just Yorick that dies; his family, his immediate family die.
Oh, that's it. It was a
Ulfredor, for me, was probably the one I wish we talked about the audio with RJ Bailey before, actually.
Yeah.
And sort of like I'm hearing Hall of Bones being reinterpreted, but effectively it's a bit like reading it again and forgetting what's happened. I do know what happened because I wrote the book, but it's like when someone reads it out and narrates it, it's different.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't believe this. I'm going to kill Ulfredor, and he's brilliant.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Tim. Do you grieve for characters when you kill them off?
Oof. Yes. The weird thing is, I grieve for them whether or not they die as well. Because actually one of the hardest things about writing Broken Brotherhood was the fact that it's the end of the story for all the characters. So actually, although obviously when someone's dead, they clearly aren't going to play a major part in the in that tale. Even if someone's had a happy ending basically and got to the end of the saga, I almost agree for the fact that I'm not writing them anymore. And I think that's been one of the hardest things actually about getting into what's the next project, is that there's actually a massive come down from finishing the series. So there's a high of finishing a series, but there's also like, this has been part of my writing life for what would it be now? Yeah, well, I suppose I finished last year, didn't I? So 13 years, a 13-year project that's just come to an end. So there's a bit of grief, actually, and just from that happening as well, in actual fact.
Perfect.
If I could jump in, if I could jump in for just a second on that, I really had a great time with Olfar and his little gang of Shakespearean misfits. And you do such great scenes when they don't just die and fade away. I mean, you have some nice death scenes, and sometimes even afterlife scenes. And I think Skari, One Eye, his death scene is just so terrific.
Yeah.
And then his approaching the bridge and deciding to cross, and then actually anticipating. That was so well done.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yes.
in answer to your question, should anybody have done should anybody have had a different fate? I would say no. I think everyone had I think everything was written brilliantly. But that's the Scaries, I think, is the one that affected me the most. Well, him and Jury, who had kind of similar experiences there at the bridge. But Scary is the one that I think I remember most.
Yeah, I got some slightly sinister email from RJ Bailey, who's done the narration, sort of saying, I enjoyed narrating your book. Thank you very much. If anything happens to Scurry One Eye, at any point, I will be coming after you. And I was like, so hopefully he doesn't watch 1 hour, 1 hour 5 minutes in. I hope he doesn't watch this bit. It's not till book 4, so from that point of view, you do get plenty of Scary on the way through the tale. But yeah, it's they couldn't all make it, unfortunately.
That's an excellent question.
Cool. I'll go to Doug next, if that's all right. One thing I'm always interested in is actually sort of, I try and make the story unpredictable. I try to make sure that I don't just give readers what they expect, but actually things change. But that's a rewarding experience. But I'd just be interested, Doug, to know what plot twist surprised you the most, or perhaps which plot twist you enjoyed the most. Either of those, really.
I really, really enjoyed the development with Jury. Jury is, like I said before, he's my favorite character. And I'm wondering if I could ask you just real quick, did you expect that he was going to become a main character?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I didn't think so. He started out as just kind of a person in the background. And then all of a sudden, the way the story develops and the way the plot develops, suddenly he's an essential character.
Yeah.
In what I think is your best subplot involving Homely and the family and Jury's involvement with them. So I was not expecting his character development at all. And I was very pleased by it. I think you just did such a great job with turning him into such a major figure and developing such a great character in the process. Yeah. And then, of course, he comes to a great end. His one-on-one duel, which, of course, has tremendous significance because the way he dies, is basically essential to the way, one of the really baddies meets his end. That, I think, that development, I think, was really one of my favorites. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, isn't it, when characters grow, and I think when you're a writer, you want all the characters to grow, but sometimes they just take full control. They don't.
They just take.
Yeah. And Jury was absolutely that. He literally started as a head in a sack. So originally, Jury's name, there's a scene in Hall of Bones where Yorick appears on basically foils Gortar's plot at the beginning of that book, and where Gortar tries to have him assassinated off page. And if you remember, there's a detail where Yorick throws the sack at Gortar, and inside it's the head of one of Gortar's men. Originally, that was Jury.
Oh, really?
That name is too good. But this is where this started. That name's too good. So I switched out Jury, and he became the guy whose head is in a sack is called Eagle. And you mentioned a couple of lines, gone, forgotten. And Jury, because Jury's name was better, I think that's what happened. He then just he just snuck up on me. And by Sundered Souls, he was absolutely one of the key characters. And I thought, well, maybe he'll just have his moment in that book. But then it just kept snowballing. And I'm pleased you said you liked it, because I think it gave that foil to, because they don't have many scenes together, him and Humley, but I think together it helps drive that whole narrative in the end. So he was a welcome surprise when that happened, actually.
Right. You're right. He sneaks up on you in a really, really good way. And that was totally unexpected. Yeah. So that was I think that was brilliant. The other character I really loved is Randall.
Yes.
Randall, he is so professional. I mean, he hates his boss, so he's very relatable. Okay?
Yeah.
And yet he's got a job to do. He does it as well as he possibly can. Does a great job with it. He's totally focused on. He has a lot of pride in his work. Totally focused on what he does. and then of course you know that it's not sustainable, and the way he comes out of that I think was pretty good. Yeah,
Cool.
so that was another very memorable character.
Yeah, that's got me thinking actually about, I think, going back to your question about favorite characters, and it's only really a cameo. It's almost like it's the baddie of, it's almost like the next boss for that particular book. But in Sundered Souls, Senile the Cold One, I loved his character, and of course that in a sense gave the grist to Randall's character coming to the fore as well.
Right. Yeah.
So sometimes you need one character to help another.
Sure.
Show off another one almost. You needed both, and again, sort of like Randall thinking, I think Senile might be mad. I think he might be completely crazy. But I'm still. He will just rip me limb from limb if I don't actually fight for him. He was great fun to write. And again, I didn't want to finish the book the way I finished Sundered Souls because I didn't want to write Senile the Cold One out of the story. So, but sometimes you've got to do it, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, Senile ends up being two characters in one. So
yes,
so that turned out to be very good.
Yeah, just to confuse readers in case they thought the book wasn't complicated enough.
Yeah, you got 150 characters. It's actually 150 and a half.
Yeah. I also really wish, well, it was essential to the plot again, but having shapeshifters that immediately take on the name and personality of the person they've inhabited. If it worked fine at the beginning, but as soon as they started to jump bodies, that also became a writing nightmare. So I'm not going to use that twice again.
You must have had charts all over your walls.
It was insane. Yeah, there's tables upon tables. It was a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
Cool. I've got one more question, which I thought you would probably appreciate, PL. So I'll go to you next because just to be absolutely clear, it's a complete series. That's on my marketing material and everything. It will not change. So it's 4 books. It was a 4-book trilogy, so it's already kind of outgrown its initial envisioning anyway from that point of view. So it's definitely going to be. This is a complete series. It's stopping at this point with books 4. That there is, I think, though, the gem for me of a sort of like a bit like Ben Galley did with his sort of Emaneska series and then returning with Scalusan Chronicles. It does feel to me like there's enough world left to sort of return in some way. So I'd just be interested to see what you think about. Have you got any views on which characters or storylines you would like to see continued? You can't say all of them.
Oh, stop! You ruined it.
Caught you out.
Okay, well, if I can't have all of them, I'm taking my toys and going home. So the aforementioned, first and foremost, the aforementioned Randall. So like Douglas, I really, Randall, we talked previously on your 6 Elemental interviews, author interviews, Tim, on my channel, that I just loved Randall. As Douglas said, I connected to him. I think it was that whole, the age thing and the life experience. Okay, what it's like to have a boss that, I don't agree with 90% of what he's doing. I'm going to be loyal, though. I'm going to try and guide him as best as I can, provide the best possible advice, stay true to myself, conduct myself with as much integrity as is possible when you're dealing with an evil, psychotic madman as a boss. And on top of everything else, try and make things better for me as a middle manager, for the people below me and beside me. And also try and, still in that, although I'm not necessarily looking for a way out, try and look for a way out for everyone out of the situation if one can be found. So I think for Randall, he's just that guy that I absolutely loved and connected with and adored. I would read a prequel story about Randall, especially to see how he became the man that he is, what shaped him prior to the events of Brotherhood of the Eagle. But especially what happens to him after the events of
because he lives.
Because he lives.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler. He lives. We're in the spoiler trailer. And what does a guy like Randall, with all that experience and all that knowledge, and having gone through everything that he's gone through, and especially considering the state of Brotherhood of the Eagle at the end of the book, he's someone who could be very valuable in the world to come. From a diplomatic standpoint, still, even though he's getting up there as a warrior, certainly as someone who, having essentially seen all sides, seeing what the world could have looked like had things gone a different way, had his boss succeeded. Well, he probably wouldn't be alive, but speaking of the boss, but you know what I mean? He's someone who has unique insights and unique wisdom to provide. So would love to see a prequel or a going forward book about Randall. Second of all, it's close because these are two of my favorite characters now, is Edda. Now, Edda's journey, of course, is a bit different. I guess if maybe I'm speaking about Edda's spirit, if one, went onwards and kept existing, perhaps, in another body or however you did it, I would like to see an Edda story going forward. But again, I would love to see a prequel story with Edda when she was younger, how she came into to be such an important court advisor, what it was like for the different, her journey to that. I would love to see all of that from Edda. So definitely an Edda prequel as well. And maybe probably, and I mentioned this to you, Tim, in our Six Elementals interview, Johan, because he's the quiet, understated in a way, but yet titular in a way hero. Like he runs the brother. Like this is a guy who was supposed to be quote unquote the hero. He kept these warring, feuding, competing interests together in the Brotherhood for 4 books, right? All this time. And he lost everything. He paid so dearly for it. He lost his family. He at the end of the book, he's crippled. Like he basically it's been a ruinous journey. He's paid so dearly for it, so much self-sacrifice, and he's the unsung hero in a way, even though he's like the titular, like it's Hrothgar's story, but
he gets the credit. He gets the credit.
But at the same time, he's paid so much to hold this alliance together by a lot of strength of will and his reputation, and of course his sword arm.
I think in many ways he's the most heroic character in the book.
That's an excellent point.
I'll make that point. I'll just come in there because that's a really good point. He is the hero. So that was a deliberate choice, was that Johan is the hero, but I didn't want to tell the hero story. Although I think Johan's story is quite compelling. During the, but he tends to come in and out of the action. He's quite often doing very heroic things off the page.
Right.
So that's but I think you're right. He is the hero of the piece, really. And he literally founds the Brotherhood upon which the series is named.
He's the hero, but not the main character.
Exactly. Yes. And I just want to add quickly a couple of things. That after seeing how skillfully, how incredibly skilled you handled Hrothgar and Hrothgar being disabled and kind of not being, in his mind as virile or as important. He had to make that adjustment from being a warrior to being something else, to being a magic user, to being to use the sight and all these things. You handled masterfully his transition, which was not without pain, which was so well done and so realistic. He had to make that transition. I would love to see how you handled Johan's transition from being the man, from being the hero, from being the guy who's, to now his new life, post family, right? Because he's thought like, what is he going to be like? Almost a shell of his former self, after all of this, right? Like what's his future forward? And knowing the way you write that so adeptly, I would love to see a Johan's story about how he handles things after the events of Broken Brotherhood. So those are my top 3. I won't say all of them. You didn't let me, but my top 3 for future.
That's interesting because they aren't the 3 I would have thought you'd have picked, but it's really interesting to see again which characters chime or which stories you feel don't feel quite finished, and that's always hard with ending a series with so many characters in it. Unless, like I said this before, unless there's a terrible long ship accident and they all sank to the bottom of the Red Sea, you've got to leave it. You've got to sort of like walk away, even though the story is continuing, if that makes sense, because it's trying to create a real world or the impression of a real world setting, I suppose.
Yeah.
Can I throw in one really off the wall character that I would dearly love to see more of, and that's Hadra the Prophetess.
Oh yes, yeah.
She's what I love about her. She's just completely insane, but when and she does her prophecy, she has total confidence in her prophecy. And when it doesn't come true, she's like, "Oh well."
Yeah, just see you later.
She was the worst prophetess ever. I mean,
she is so lovely. I just loved every scene she was in.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah,
she was just terrific.
Yeah, she's definitely a scene stealer. And I just want to. I'm being very selfish. I want to slip one more question in, if that's okay. I know we're going to go for another 15, 20 minutes or so, but I want to slip this question in, and I want to preface it with saying this, that we all know that, and I hate to name he who shall not be named, one of our favorite authors, George R. Martin. So apologies, he who shall not be named, for not finishing A Song of Ice and Fire. So we all know, and I don't think it's a big spoiler because I think most of the world has seen the TV version of that series, Game of Thrones, in that the penultimate battle that wasn't really a penultimate battle because it kind of didn't really live up to what we expected, and we couldn't see half of it because of the way it was filmed. Can you tell I'm a bit salty here? I'm not salty about this at all. I'm not salty about this at all. But in any case, one of the issues with the TV version of how things wound up in facing the penultimate, with that penultimate battle and facing the big existential threat, was how that existential threat was dealt with, specifically who dealt with it in terms of main characters. Specifically, that one main character who's very beloved wasn't the one who got to, kind of have that final confrontation. And although that was a subversion of expectations, which a lot of people tend to applaud critically, people weren't satisfied with how that went down. I think we all know what I'm dancing around here, but we all know who's watched it knows what I'm talking about. Now, I felt that in Brotherhood of the Eagle, it was exceptionally well done, the way you subverted expectations in that specific regard about confronting the ultimate threat. And there's a bit of a parallel there in that the ultimate threat, it has to be dealt with, and then there's other threats within the conflicts between the clans that have to be dealt with. So in some ways, a bit of a parallel with Game of Thrones. So my question is, after all this rambling, is basically, keeping all this in reference that I've just told you, do you find it difficult, or did you find it difficult to subvert expectations, especially in big things that matter to the series like that? And in the way you did it, was it very purposeful, or was it more as you got to a certain point in writing, you're like, you know what, I have to decide how we're going to do this, which is fair game, and we're going to do it this way, as opposed to perhaps a more traditional ending?
So I suppose what's that question getting at? I suppose you're saying there, in terms of Adalrica's fate in particular, it's actually again I suppose what I would call a major side character.
Yes.
The deed through Jolene. Now, to be fair, that was always the plan, because that seed was effectively sown in Lost Gods when Broar's gifts are handed over to the crew of Stormweaver, and if even at that point, you notice Jolene can pick up Death's gift, and nobody else can. But of course, it doesn't mean that she's necessarily that weapon until those decisions are made in book 4.
Although she survived to be able to wield it. That was the other thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it could have been Gortar, and I did toy with that idea because obviously he bears lightning's fire.
Yeah.
So I deliberately created 2 weapons that could do the deed, but in the end, it just I needed Gortar to close the gate. So I realized, I can't just simply, you can't just pull it out again. It just, the whole story would unravel with literally something going slightly differently. So really, it kind of like her path to that, getting rid of Adalrica, that was always really the intended path. But by the time Lost Gods was done, I didn't know exactly how she was going to do it, because I think that's the other challenge. You want to make the baddie really difficult to kill. Yeah. But it can't be too difficult to kill the baddie, otherwise the person wouldn't. And I think that maybe is a bit where we get to with the Game of Thrones TV show, that it'll perhaps almost felt a little bit easy, a little bit. It happened too quickly, and I think
unearned. Yeah.
with the Dalriku, he's literally killing key characters left, right, and centre throughout that battle. That final 5,000, 6,000 words. So many people die, and it of course it takes Etta. It actually takes Etta to interfere to make it even remotely possible for Jolene to actually do what she does. And I think that's why it probably feels more satisfying, because the price was high, even though Jolene, emerges in theory unscathed from that encounter. So that was always the plan. I never actually saw a Dalriku as the antagonist, though. I mean, he's not even in book one.
I know. I hear you.
He was more a case of he was Johann's antagonist primarily, and really, actually, for Hrothgar's story, Hrothgar's beef and Hrothgar's reason for trying to get through all of this stuff that I throw at him is to deal with Turfinger,
Right.
and back to the point you made, Alan, about what was the death that hit you the hardest? It was Yorick. Well, it hit Hrothgar pretty hard as well, and everything went sideways from that point on. And he's the rest of the series is really all about Hrothgar's.
Yeah,
it is fundamentally it's a coming of age tale, but it's also a vengeance tale that he's got to get to Turfinger, and the first moment he gets to, okay, I can actually face him. I'm going to do. He doesn't hesitate. I'm going to kill you. There, Turfinger also doesn't want Hrothgar to survive as well.
Yeah,
but that for me that was a kind of a more critical encounter, which actually I had less worked out as to how that was going to work until Jury's storyline came along. But that's how Hrothgar again is going to defeat a very overpowered villain. He's going to try the same move twice, and he's going to regret it because he has no idea Hrothgar's already seen him pull that move. And so it kind of enabled me to lock that.
That was so good.
Yeah, so good. And don't get me wrong. Like, listen, I'm ragging on Game of Thrones. I'm ragging on the producers there. I'm ragging on. Let's face facts. First of all, the writer doesn't owe us anything. You're the producers. There was an element of it was amazing the way it was done. So I'm not. This is my own selfish, very subjective wishes as because
one thing hate on the channel, PL. They've turned the tide against you.
Well, one thing I hate is when someone would try to write my books the way they would want to say, well, if you would have done this, I'm sure for Douglas and Tim, same thing, or for Alan, when you're reviewing a book, Alan, like you're reading it as you're reading it. Someone else may have a totally different perspective, but as the author, I can tell you that we write our books with intention. So if you don't like the way we wrote it, fair game. But at the same time, we normally did that for a specific reason. So clearly the producers had a reason why they had Arya kill the Night King. For those, I hope it didn't spoil those few of you who haven't.
Yeah.
6 years ago. And it's not as if there was not a lot of great elements to having her do it. It's just that because in the TV show specifically, for me, just my personal opinion, they had built Jon Snow up to the point of
the whole series.
This confrontation was inevitable. It was happening. It's on. It's going to be 1v1. Jon, one of the best swordsmen out there, supposedly, versus the Night King. It was going to be, that was the duel that we thought was coming. We didn't get it. Right? And that's why we're disappointed. Not so much that Arya killing the Night King is fabulous. And she's a worthy character to do it. She has the skills. It was amazing. And she was one of my favorite characters too. It's because the entire story seemed to build. And yes, so now you subverted expectations. You subverted them. But then did you subvert them in a way that the payoff is something that viewers would go, yeah, that was an amazing way you subverted that? Or was it like, oh, I'm disappointed that you subverted it that way?
I mean, I think just to dwell on that, I think it's the lack of foreshadowing that lets it down. We all try and get that done. We don't always do it perfectly. I don't think I do it perfectly in Hall of Bones myself. Actually, I think again I was learning with that debut book, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But I think it's a combination of lack of foreshadowing and pacing. And that final season needed 2 extra episodes, and I think it would have been so much better for it. But obviously, I wasn't the person putting millions and millions of dollars into producing it. So what do I know?
Yeah, but I mean but yours was extremely well done, Tim, and I loved that ending. It wasn't quite the ending, but that
endings.
Yes, that penultimate battle, the battle preceding the final battle. I love that. I loved that was the that character particularly, especially actually what she'd been through. She had her moment, right? Because of all she'd been through and the way she was denigrated because of her background and all that. Like, I love that moment. And because it made sense also because of the two who could have potentially done the deed other than perhaps Johan as the titular hero. She was the most physically capable, so Hrothgar versus her. And of course, because they were so close and they were a couple, it felt as if Hrothgar, and of course he had a lot to do with the victory overall to get them to that point. It felt like Hrothgar got to share a piece of that, and so did Johan because he helped get them there.
It was a team effort.
Yes,
it was.
A team, yeah. She struck the final blow, but it was a team effort. So and that was great. I want to give the opportunity as we wind down, and you've all been so generous with your time. Before we do the actual wind down and sign off and things, I'd like to give both Alan and Douglas a chance to either ask Tim another question or make any final comments they'd like to make overall about the series that perhaps like to do. So, Alan,
no worries. What inspired you, Tim, to come up with the Norse story, your series? Was it movies? Was it a series, or was it just general history itself that inspired you to write this series?
Yeah, this was a weird one actually, because the actual concept was a bolt from the blue. So I'm normally quite a planning type of writer, and I normally will sketch out the story and the feel for a bit. When I started writing Hall of Bones, I'd literally just shelved a novel that I didn't feel was good enough.
Yeah.
And it was, every author's got one of these. He got the trunk novel. I had mine, and I just, it was almost like the character of Hrothgar walked into my mind. I'm going to sound slightly mad here, but this is normal for writers. It's normal. Yeah. His characters walked in, and he was from a Viking setting. It was a Norse word, a Norse type world, and it just, I don't know, just by simply taking that setting, it just snowballed really, really quickly from there. So it was like he arrived fully formed, and the world just coalesced around him. It's the only way I can really describe it. So I didn't watch a TV show or a series or read a book and think I would like to do that. Yeah. It was more the other way around. I always describe it as Viking inspired rather than Norse because it's got its own mythology that's not Norse.
Yeah.
But I knew if you'd sort of set it in a Viking setting, it kind of gives people a bit of a reference point straight away. Mm. A lot of people really like that world. It's obviously a key part of our history, isn't it? In terms of worldwide history, in terms of the influence the Vikings had. So it felt like a really comfortable thing to write. Is the only way I can describe it. And I think it just helped add colour to the world in a way that everyone could have those reference points without hammering it home, I suppose. But it wasn't just your standard medieval fantasy setting. You do see people criticise sometimes. It just feels a bit the same.
Right.
When I did this was cutting edge. Hardly anyone was writing sort of Viking Norse-inspired fantasy back in 2011 when I started writing it. But it took me so long to independently publish that by the time I got there, it looked like I was riding on the wave of a lot of other people did that in that same decade, basically. But I think that was quite good for me because it actually gave it a bit of, that there was just an appetite for that kind of setting, that kind of story, and that kind of feel. And actually, I think the trad publishers going that way in many ways probably helped me because it kind of got people thinking that fantasy wasn't just medieval England, in sort of 1200 AD or whatever it was. Right. So it wasn't so much. It was a moment of inspiration rather than being inspired by a series or by a TV show. Obviously, you're still taking loads of other stuff from what you read and what you watch, and so that's definitely influenced it. But it was more of a bolt from the blue moment, really.
Brilliant. Yep. Brilliant.
Douglas, any last questions or comments?
Well, this is kind of related, actually. So you obviously, the series shows a lot of depth of knowledge of Viking culture. And I was wondering how much of that came before and how much of it was developed through research as you were writing.
I love the fact that the premise of your question is that there was research. There was none, because this is fantasy. So I literally, so for example, there are inns and taverns in my fantasy world, that wasn't the case in Viking culture because it actually was all around the long haul and there were more communals. There were communal spaces. It wasn't that, but I needed inns because I needed inns where things went down, deals could be done. So if anything, I actually deliberately didn't do any research because one of the things I was really conscious of was I didn't want to start. So I did think, should I read Beowulf or should I, pull out some of the the Icelandic sagas and look at those? I thought if you do that, you're going to start to pinch and take ideas from that potentially, whereas this is a work of fantasy. So I literally went just for the aesthetic alone. I don't even use like language that just, I have swords and axes and shields and things. I deliberately avoided Viking language because, again, I just wanted it to be easy to pick up, easy for people to be immersive in it. And then ironically probably bringing up their research and their knowledge into that is what helped them fill in the blanks. But if anything, it was a very, very. So the only thing I did do some research on was how do you build a Viking longship, and also how do you move a Viking longship. So I tell a lie. There is one point where the use of rollers to get a longship across land. That's quite a well-established historical point that they did that. How well that would have worked on an ice shelf, in a hurricane, I don't know. That may be a bit of poetic license, but primarily I was really worried that I would end up aping other stories rather than telling my own if I did too much. So actually, very, very light touch indeed. In actual fact,
did you have an educational background in medieval or Icelandic sagas? It just all came to you one night in a dream, huh?
As unbelievable as that sounds. I mean, I suppose looking back, I've read things like Henry Treace's Viking Saga that's a series from the 1950s. So I guess I was familiar with that. I mean, obviously Tolkien himself draws a lot, doesn't he, from Norse myth as part of his tellings and things. But it was more. I think because I was going for the aesthetic, I think if I'd used the Norse gods, I would have done a lot more research.
Right.
So, someone like Bjorn Larson and the writing he does, which is obviously a retelling of Norse mythology. You need to know Norse mythology to retell it. Because I wasn't doing that, I didn't feel under the same pressure. And I do believe, if you're writing fantasy, I don't like it when people say, "Well, that couldn't have happened, could it?" Because in 1852. They didn't have that, did they? Well,
no potatoes in Middle Earth, right?
Very, very light touch. I think a different type of story, I probably would have approached it in a different way. Well, I probably wouldn't have written it.
I love that your mythology is quite different from Norse mythology, and yet the vibe is very close. The sort of attitude and outlook, worldview, very close.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to quickly put up Zirzaku one says the conversation between Fitz Farshir, from Robin Hobb's Realm of the Endlings, and I presume this is Hrothgar. Would be wonderful to read. I feel like they would either be great friends or end up fighting. Yeah, I wonder who would the Fitz Farshir versus Hrothgar. Well, what Hrothgar? I mean, magic on both sides. Well, yeah, that'd be an interesting 1v1. Would this be Hrothgar pre? Injury and enhancement with the sight, or would this be post? Like what? We guess it would depend on what we're talking. And would this be young Fitz in his prime, or would this be older Fitz?
That's a lot of questions, PL, for me to unravel.
I know. I like me. I like to throw those what ifs in there. So
but I can't deny that there's Robin Hobb is a very influential author to me. So probably in terms of rather than talk about Viking culture, ironically, it's probably Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy that's the biggest single influence, certainly to the feel, and I think going with the choice of having the depth of characters, and to a certain extent, Hrothgar is there are lots of nods here to some of my favourite fantasy books and fantasy series. Obviously, so Nuna's Wedding is effectively a nod to George R.R. Martin and the Red Wedding. The fight in Sundered Souls where they take the nine chosen riders of Johann and they go to fight the big bad and they just get annihilated is a bit of a nod to Lord of the Rings. There are things in there, and Hrothgar is really a nod to Fitz chivalry, and that initial trilogy in particular. He draws some inspiration from that, whilst I think also being distinct. So kind of bringing him together with almost the person that helped inspire him. I'd probably give it to Fitz. I think Fitz has just been around longer, and I think Robin Hobb's creation is just more powerful.
He's an old salty veteran that knows how to, even if he's physically outmatched in magic,
Hrothgar's just a teenager.
Exactly. He's just a callow youth. He's going to get, he needs Jolin to protect him at this point. If that fantastical situation arises, he's in trouble, I think.
So. But listen, you all have been so generous with your time. It's just been amazing to do this. I think we could talk for another 5 hours about this.
Yeah.
We could. I think we want to talk for another 5 hours, but that's not realistic. I really wanted to give each one of you, so Alan, Tim, and Douglas, an opportunity as we sign off, just to say where we can find you in the space in terms of your social media handles. For Alan, his blogging, where we can find him there. For Tim and Doug, their books, and then afterwards I'll close things off. But I'd like to give everyone the opportunity to do that as we wind down. So Alan, if you will, comments.
Yeah, you can find me on Fanfi Addicts, Facebook, all the book groups most of the book groups that are on Facebook, on Instagram. That's where you find me. So yeah.
Yeah, you're not hard to find, are you? You tend to be in all those spaces.
I leave it all over the place.
Yeah. And any final comments, Alan, about the series or?
Well, I just hope to see, will Tim continue this series one day? You never know. Hopefully,
there's hope, Alan. There's definitely going to be a follow-up trilogy of some description.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I chucked that question at PL, but he gave me none of the characters I intended to use. So
immediately contrary and not cooperate.
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to is the RJ Bailey. Well,
yeah,
the characters. I love his voice. I love his voice in Lee Connolly's audiobooks. But I just want to see what he does to the characters, what voices he gives to them, and all that stuff. So that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing now.
Awesome. Yeah, I can say now you won't be disappointed, Alan, when you get your hands on that.
Because he's a great narration voice. He has absolutely brilliant. That Scottish accent just does it. You know.
He is. He's amazing.
I look forward to that now. So, yeah.
Douglas, thank you, Tim. Douglas.
Well, you can find me on Twitter pretty easily. I'm on Bluesky as well. I've cut back on my Instagram, but I'm still there. I think probably Twitter at this point is the easiest way to get a one-on-one or in touch with me there. What else? Final comments on Tim? Look, whatever series you write, okay, I'm going to be interested. All right, so I totally appreciate the thought of maybe I want to even do a different world. As long as you're writing. I mean, such a great writer. So whatever you do, I'm going to be interested. So go for it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Definitely.
And Tim.
So where can you find me? So probably the place that I've sort of built, where you can then find all the other links from that place. It's my website, so timhardieauthor.co.uk, pretty easy to find. So that you got all my links there for social media. I'm basically on X, Facebook, Bluesky, and I've recently delved into Instagram as well. I find drag kicking and screaming into that space, all basically under the Tim Hardie Author moniker. So if you search for that, again, a bit like Doug said, I'm not that difficult to find. But if you want to kind of go to the official place to sort of maybe find a bit more about me, I think my website's probably the best place to go to start with.
I guess I should have mentioned my website.
Please do, Doug.
DouglasLumsdenAuthor.com.
Okay, perfect. And Tim, any parting comments about this live or about anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think, just thanks very much for PL for putting this together, coming up with the idea. It's lovely. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate Doug and Alan, you taking the time out of your weekend to listen to me ramble for nearly 2 hours, basically. I really appreciate it. And I suppose, we kind of, we do need to celebrate our work, don't we? It's very easy sometimes to sort of undersell what we've done. But I think, that I've really enjoyed tonight. I think it's been a great conversation and chance to sort of explore some stuff I've never actually talked about before. So that's been really good as well.
Well, this has been such a privilege for me to host, to have Alan and Douglas here, two wonderful people in the community who I admire and respect. And again, I hope to get a chance to sit down with them individually as well and interview them, because they're fascinating and would be a great interview. And of course, I have Tim, who I consider a dear friend. I've had the honor of seeing, Brotherhood of the Eagle, morph into this thing, from SBFBO finalists, Hall of Bones, and see this series continue to ascend in popularity, as have Alan and Douglas. And for me to enjoy it, and have the privilege of getting advanced reader copies along the way and things like that, like this has just been such a treat, just a real special part of my journey as an author and as someone who I consider somewhat of a blogger. And just seeing Tim develop his craft and start off as such a phenomenal author with all this talent and just continue to ascend, and with every book being better written than the last. It's just been a real treat. So it's been humbling for me. And thank you, Tim, for giving me the opportunity to host and bring these other two wonderful gentlemen into, and thank you so much, Alan Douglas. So honored to have you attend. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for having me.
This has been wonderful.
An absolute pleasure.
And quickly, for me, I'm P.L. Stewart. I'm author of the John Kingdom Saga. 4 books out. The 5th one, A Pack of Wolves, coming in soon. The cover reveal coming tomorrow. So my series, plstewart.com, the John Kingdom Saga.
Add it to my TBR.
I am honored. Thank you. You can find me on all the regular social media, usually at PL Stewart Writes, for things like Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Facebook, and Bluesky. But predominantly, I'm still holding on to dear life to X. I know it's a different place, but I'm in my own little bubble there with all the people I care about, like the Allens and the Douglases and the Tims. I stay in that bubble and I don't stray, right? And I think if you do that, I think you can make something out of that platform. But anyways, and the blog stuff. I'm a member of Before We Go blog, one assistant editor under the wonderful Beth Talbot. Shout out to Beth and all my Before We Go blog peeps, like Alan with FanFi. We have a great blog site, wonderful people. A lot of them cross over between blogs like FanFi and Before We Go blog, and so find my reviews there and on Goodreads. And I have reviews on every single book in Tim's wonderful Brothers, either Brotherhood of the Eagle Saga and of A Quiet Vengeance, which is, it's just, like I said, one of my favorite books of all time. Tim's series, again, is one of my favorite science fiction fantasy series of all time. And as a video on that, watch where I placed it. And finally, to everyone who came in the chat, including John A. Douglas, Tori Talks for stopping by, kind of doing a cameo there. Thanks, Tori. And Zerazaku1, who's such a wonderful supporter and constant friend of the community and always dropping into these lives. Thank you so much, Zerazaku1, for hanging out and asking such amazing questions and making some really great comments. Well, thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who will watch this on the replay. Everyone who's been in the live chat and on the replay, you are what makes this type of long form content amazing. So, merci beaucoup and thank you. And this has been our deep dive into Brothers of the Eagle with the wonderful Alan Behan from Fine Fight Addicts, brilliant author Douglas Lumpson, and of course our special guest, the author of the series himself, Tim Hardie. Read Brotherhood of the Eagle, folks. If you like Norse-Inspired Fantasy, if you like John Gwynn, for example. And a quick final compliment for Tim. I know he's sick of compliments, but George R. R. Martin, one of my favorite authors as well, despite my saltiness about him. He is also another comparator for me with Tim. Few people handle expansive casts of characters the way George R. R. Martin and Tim do. So if you like George R. R. Martin as well, read Tim's Brotherhood of the Eagle. So we are signing off. Have a great night, evening, afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for